I'm covering 4 different stitches in this video. The first is Clasped Weft, which is good for making blocks of color, like you see here. The next is the Soumak Stitch, which kind of creates this raised braided texture. The third is Rya Knots, which I think you can see creates some fringe. And then the fourth is a series of loops. So that requires an extra tool. One of my favorite techniques in weaving is called the Clasped Weft method. So for this, you're going to need 2 separate threads or yarns or whatever you're using. And it's really a very simple technique. You could even use more, but we're just going to start off with the 2 threads. So you start off by opening your shed and passing your shuttle through, just like a normal pass. Then at the end with the shuttle, you're going to take your second color and just twist once. So what I do is I basically just lay it over the top of my first thread and then pass it back through. So now I have 2 lines in the same shed. So from here I can adjust my lengths. I could bring it all the way over to one side or the other side all the way through. For the purposes of this design, I'm going to start with it right in the middle. I'm going to beat it down. It's going to look a little different because now you have 2 passes in each shed. So I open up my next shed, pass my shuttle through. Essentially passing that under my new thread and pass it back through. So they're just twisted once. It's not any sort of crazy twist. You're just clasping them together. So you want to make sure you don't have any loops at the side. Just do anything you need to do to work out any tension issues. And then I can draw this back over. So I'm going to do a little gradual shift to my left. So I don't know if you can see it yet, but the pink is just about 1 set of warp threads to the left and the white is following it back in that direction. So one more time. Open up my shed, pass the shuttle through. Give it a little twist. Just passing that shuttle thread underneath the white and back through. I'm going to keep shifting to the left, beat it down, so now I have a little diagonal line going there in the middle. And for my last thread, I'm just going to pass the pink through on its own and beat that down to finish that off. And that is the clasped weft method of weaving. So for the next method, I am removing our shed stick or heddle stick or whatever you want to call it, this guy. And that is so that I can utilize more warp threads in the next technique. So this next stitch is called the Soumak Stitch. And this method involves more of a hand-picking style. So maybe pick a shorter length of weft thread depending on how much you want to do with this. But it also has a more raised effect above the weave. I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit so you can see this. So to start this off, I'm going around these 2 warp threads. And for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm thinking of every 2 warp threads as 1. So I'm going to bring it through until I have a short end. And I'm just winding this up so I can utilize my weft a little better. And I'm just making sure my tension is okay. It was a little loose, so I'm tightening it up. Just check periodically, especially if you remove or change anything in the weave. So I'm passing this around once. So that's just going to secure it at your end. You could, of course, do this after a regular weave, and then you would be all set to go. So what this is going over a set of threads and coming back under a certain number. So for this, I'm going over 3, including the one I'm on, and then I'm coming under 1 set. I hope you can see that, and it's creating this little overlap of stitches. So it's almost like a back stitch if you think about embroidery. You could also think of this as going 2 beyond the one I'm under. Whatever you choose to do, whatever pattern, just keep it consistent or not, up to you. I'm just going to get through this. I'm going to do a slightly more compact pattern coming back the other way just so you can see that. So for this, I'm only going over 2 and under 1. And you may have to untangle yourself periodically, but that's okay. So when I say I'm going over 2, counting the set of warp threads I'm already on, I count that one, the one next to it, and then I come under that one next to it. So for every 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You could do 4 over 2, you could do 3 over 2, whatever you'd like. And I would play around with it because depending on the thickness of your weft thread, you may or may not get the desired effect. I really like this one because it feels like you're almost designing it as you go. So then when you finish it off, it almost looks like a little braid if you do 2 opposing rows. This next section is just a plain weave. I just chose to do it with fabric strips. What this is doing is it's elevating my weave to the next section. It's not really going to show because that next thing I'm doing will cover it, but I just wanted some space in between the Soumak stitch and my next method. The thing about fabric strips is it has a little more height or width depending on how you cut it. So in some of these I'm choosing to beat it all the way down, and for some of them I'm leaving it flat. Just 2 more options you have. The next technique is called the Rya Knot, or Rya Knot. RYA in any case. So for this, you're going to want a small bundle of weft threads that you will hold together as one. So I'm just going to find the center of my warp. Because I have an odd number, I'm using the center 3 for this. So basically to do this, that's my right thread. I bring it around and underneath and back up to the top. The rest of these will be done on a set of 2, but this one's being done on 3 because it's in the center. And I just pull it down tight. So just to make more bundles, I wrapped this around my arm several times, and now I'm just cutting the ends. And that is a really quick way to get a bunch of uniform threads so that you can work with it. There. So I'm counting out 5 threads to use, which means when I double it, it will be 10. So going around my set of 2, just find the center of my bundle. I pick up the right side and I bring this around and under in between the 2 warp threads. So once again, bring that through the center, and then for the left, around and through. So I have my 2 ends, and I'm just going to pull it down. I'm going with a little bit longer than I want in the end because I'm going to trim it as a group once it's all finished. So we have our bundle. Go around the right side and bring it down. Go around the left side from the outside, not over the top, under the bottom. Although you could do it up over the top, then you would have your knots pointing up. Just one more time at regular speed. So once you have as many knots as you're going to do, comb it through. My yarn is kind of a little wrinkled, for lack of a better word, so I'm going to iron it later, but for now I'm just going to show you one way to trim it. I like to get a straight edge. You could use a piece of tape, you can use your comb, you can use whatever you want. I'm just separating my center bundle here. So dealing with 1/2 at a time, I'm just bringing it to a sort of chevron, a point. So I'm just using my little shed stick there to give it a line, and then I'm going to cut it along that line. Be careful not to cut anything else. Alright, and then I'm just going to do my other side to make it nice and pretty. There we are. Alright, I'm going to zoom back out. Now it seems so small. Next, because I did the fabric strips underneath this section, I'm just going to use fabric on top. I'm just going to do some more sumac stitches because I was curious to see what kind of texture I would get. The sumac stitch is definitely one that accommodates a lot of different materials and textures, but anything that will raise it up more will give you more of a fun raised pattern. Next up, I'm going to show you how to add a series of loops to your weave. You're going to need a weave in progress, some sort of round item like a chopstick or a pen or something. Just going to do a couple of rows of plain weave. Alright, so this is where it switches up. So I have my regular row that I've woven through, and then I'm going to pick up in between anything that's on top. I'm going to pick up and put on my chopstick here. And then I will beat this all down and weave another row to lock it in. So beat that down. And then you can remove the chopstick or whatever you have it around and make sure you beat it down again because there's more space created by the physical object. Next, I just want to show you with one slightly bigger item, just in case you couldn't see it with the small chopstick. So just a couple of rows in between. And here we go. So I'm just wrapping it around this larger wooden dowel. And then just another row of plain weave to lock it in. Beat it down, and then I did another row here just because I had a thicker loop so it felt a little looser. You don't want to weave too many rows before you take out the stick though, because you want to be able to beat it down as tight as possible, which I'm doing here. So that just gives you a little bit of a loop. You could even cut them so you get almost like a raised rug. And you can do several rows of loops or just one as a decoration or whatever you'd like to do. So those are the other methods you can use to complicate your weaving or make it a little more decorative. As always, email with any questions.